Can you solve all these Class 10 Science Chapter 8 How Do Organisms Reproduce questions? Abbreviate HP. Excellent. Human papillomavirus is a brilliant choice. Male sex hormone. Valid point. Testosterone is true. Production of sperm. Good thinking. Spermatogenesis is the right answer. Amoeba reproduces by. Right again. Binary fission is a valid answer. Hydra divides by dash. Correct. Budding is the right answer. Amoeba divided by dash. Strong choice. Binary fission is the right answer. 10 the anther contains. Right choice. Pollen is the best answer. Fruits are formed from. Exactly. Ovary makes sense. Rhizopus reproduces by. Well picked. Spore formation is the correct answer. Hydra can reproduce via. Bravo. All of the following is the answer. What does a seed contain? On track. Future plant is the correct answer. Rhizopus is an example of. Sharp thinking. Spore formation is the right choice. The sperms are produced in. Correct response. Witness is the most accurate answer. It bears unisexual flowers. You're right. Papaya is the correct answer. Sugarcane is propagated by. Clear logic. Your choice stem cutting is sound. Spirogyra reproduces wood. Great thinking. Fragmentation is the right choice. Spirogyra is an example of. Well done. Fragmentation is the right choice. Rhizopus reproduce through. Smart move. Spores is an accurate answer. All the variations are gadash. Solid response. Both is a valid choice. How does Plasmodium divide? Nice selection. By multiple fission is the correct and valid answer. What process produces sperm? You got it. Your choice spermatogenesis is right. Watermelon is a dash flower. Nice work. You chose unisexual and it is correct. Example of unisexual flower. Nicely done. Papaya is a solid answer. The life of the ovum is dash. You chose one day, and it is correct. Amoeba reproduces by means of. Great job. Binary fission is the accurate answer. Binary fission takes place in. Good job. Amoeba works well here. A sperm fertilizes the egg in. Well reasoned. Fallopian tube is the correct choice. Sexual reproduction results in. Excellent choice. Large amounts of variation is the right answer. Vegetatively propagated plants. Smart pick. Are genetically similar is the correct choice. A tuber bud is known as a dash. Perfect. I is the correct choice. Where does fertilization happen? You're right. Oviduct fallopian tube is the correct answer. The meeting of a sperm and ovum. Well reasoned. Fertilization is the correct choice. Sexual reproduction requires two. Excellent choice. Gametes is the right answer. Rose is propagated through dash. Right again. Stem is a valid answer. The female part of the flower is. You got it. Your choice style is right. Anemophily is the pollination by. On track. Wind is the correct answer. The period of pregnancy is called. Exactly. Gestation period makes sense. What do we call a fertilized egg? Nice work. You chose zygote and it is correct. How does the pine tree reproduce? Right choice. By producing cones is the best answer. Aborting the female in the womb is. Smart pick. Female foeticide is the correct choice. Generative nucleus divides forming. Clear logic. Your choice 2 male nuclei is sound. Which of the following is an eye-seed? Bravo, copper tea is the answer. What is essential for reproduction? Perfect. Copying of Dina is the correct choice. The flower of the hibiscus plant is. Well done. Bisexual is the right choice. Which is the site of fertilization? Excellent. Fallopian tubes is a brilliant choice. In grafting, base stem is called dash. Strong choice. Stalk is the right answer. Plasmodium reproduces by this method. Sharp thinking. Multiple fission is the right choice. Seed structure that stores nutrients. You chose endosperm, and it is correct. Planaria reproduces by means of dash. Great job. Regeneration is the accurate answer. Leishmania reproduces by this method. Valid point. Binary fission is true. Pollination via wind is also known as. Good job. Anemophily works well here. Spirigyra reproduces by means of dash. Nice selection. Fragmentation is the correct and valid answer. What are the female sex cells called? Nicely done. Eggs is a solid answer. The following one is the male hormone. Well picked. Testosterone is the correct answer. The term scion is used in relation to. Correct response. Grafting is the most accurate answer. In Rhizopus, the spores are present in. Smart move. Sporangium is an accurate answer. Bryophyllum reproduces through dash. Solid response. Bud is a valid choice. The ratio of the male to the female is. Good thinking. Sex ratio is the right answer. Seed structure that grows become roots. Correct. Radical is the right answer. Fertilization in plants occurs in the. Great thinking. Embryo sac is the right choice. Lippy sloop is a hormone-releasing eyed. Good thinking. False is the right answer. The reproductive part of flower is dash. Perfect. Flower is the correct choice. Where are egg cells produces in humans? Sharp thinking. Ovaries is the right choice. Which male accessory gland is unpaired? Right again. Prostate is a valid answer. Bryophyllum reproduces by means of dash. Good job, leaf works well here. In the human male, we're a sperm made. Nice selection. Testes is the correct and valid answer. Which part of the flower forms the fruit? Correct response. Only ovary is the most accurate answer. Which process is considered to be faster? Bravo, asexual is the answer.
Spores are formed in a structure known as?
Excellent. Sporangia is a brilliant choice.
The normal duration of menstrual cycle is? You got it. Your choice 28 days is right. Which of the following is a future shoot? Smart pick. Plumule is the correct choice. The following one is the unisexual flower. On track. Watermelon is the correct answer. The plant that propagates by leaf buds is? Clear logic. Your choice, bryophyllum, is sound. Which female hormone maintains pregnancy? Nice work. You chose progesterone, and it is correct. The fertilization act takes place in dash. Excellent choice. Oviduct is the right answer. The male reproductive organ in a flower is? Well done. Stamen is the right choice. What is the primary sex hormones of males? Great job, testosterone is the accurate answer. The dash cover and protect the flower bud. You chose sepals, and it is correct. The type of reproduction in human beings is? You're right. None of these is the correct answer. All of these animals are pollinators except. Well reasoned. Fish is the correct choice. A dash is formed when fertilization occurs. Well picked. Zygote is the correct answer. How many nuclei are there in the embryo sac? Solid response. 8 is a valid choice. Following one follows vegetative propagation. Smart move. Banana plant is an accurate answer. Double fertilization is a phenomenon seen in? Nicely done. Angiosperms is a solid answer. Example of an asexual mode of reproduction. Right choice. All is the best answer. The process used for asexual reproduction is? Valid point. Mitosis is true. What gland triggers the beginning of puberty? Great thinking. Pituitary is the right choice. Reproductive glands in which eggs are produced. Correct. Ovaries is the right answer. The seeds of a flower are produced in the dash. Exactly. Oval makes sense. The ovaries produce female sex hormones called? Strong choice. Both estrogen and progesterone is the right answer. The tests produce the male sex hormone called? Good thinking. Testosterone is the right answer. The following is the male reproductive hormone. Great thinking. Testosterone is the right choice. How many male gametes does a pollen grain has? Valid point 2 is true. Sexually transmitted diseases caused by virus. Smart pick. AIDS and wart is the correct choice. Pollination by means of insects is called dash. Nice work. You chose entomophily and it is correct.
Budding is common mode of reproduction seen in. Nice selection. Yeast and hydra is the correct and valid answer. In female, fertilization of ovum takes place in. Well picked. Fallopian tubes is the correct answer.
The following one is not the bacterial disease. Strong choice. Warts is the right answer.
Plasmodium is an example of an organism showing.
Well reasoned. Multiple fission is the correct choice.
Identify the diploid cell amongst the following. Perfect. Primary spermatocyte is the correct choice.
Following is not a type of asexual reproduction. You chose none of these, and it is correct.
Bacterial disease which is transmitted sexually.
Great job. Gonorrhea is the accurate answer.
Where does fertilization occur in human females?
Exactly. Oviduct makes sense. Which part of the flower produces female gamete?
Bravo. Ovary is the answer.
The following one is the male part of the flower. Smart move. Androecium is an accurate answer. Formation of new DNA takes place by means of dash. Right again. Replication is a valid answer.
Regeneration is a mode of asexual reproduction in.
Correct response. Hydra and planaria is the most accurate answer. Bryophyllum can be propagated vegetatively by the. Excellent choice. Leaf is the right answer. During favorable conditions, amoeba reproduces by. Well done. Binary fission is the right choice. How many chromosomes are in each of the sex cells?
You got it. Your choice 23 is right.
Formation of the sperm from spermatids is known as. You're right. Spermiogenesis is the correct answer.
In asexual reproduction, all of the offspring are.
Excellent. Genetically identical is a brilliant choice. Offspring that are produced by only one parent are.
On track. Clones is the correct answer. Longitudinal binary fission takes place in case of.
Solid response. Euglena is a valid choice.
Characteristics which are unable to be passed down. Nicely done. Length of hair is a solid answer. Fusion of gametes give rise to a single cell called.
Sharp thinking. Zygote is the right choice.
This is the process of the uterine lining shedding.
Clear logic. Your choice menstruation is sound.
Where does fertilization typically occur in humans?
Good job. In the fallopian tube works well here. At the time of entering into ovule, pollen tube has. Correct. 2 male nuclei is the right answer.
The following is not a sexually transmitted disease.
Right choice. Crown is the best answer.
A human zygote should have dash chromosomes inside. Nice work. You chose 46 and it is correct. Organism grows new parts to replace broken off ones.
Perfect. Regeneration is the correct choice. In a potato, vegetative propagation takes place by. Good thinking. Stem tuber is the right answer.
Do birth control pills prevent you from getting steed?
Right again. No is a valid answer.
What process happens when a sperm joins with an egg?
Bravo. Fertilization is the answer.
Asexual reproduction takes place through budding in.
Great job. Yeast is the accurate answer.
Flowers with both androecium and gynoecium are called.
Solid response. Bisexual is a valid choice.
Diaphragm is the mechanical barrier of birth control.
Nicely done. True is a solid answer.
All the petals of the flower together are called dash.
You got it. Your choice corolla is right.
Vegetative propagation in sweet potato takes place by.
Well reasoned. Root is the correct choice.
Following one plays an important role in reproduction.
Nice selection. Dina is the correct and valid answer.
Which structure is correctly paired with its function?
Sharp thinking. Testes development of sperm is the right choice.
Hibiscus flower is called bisexual because it contains.
Correct response. Both stamen and pistil is the most accurate answer.
A major male sex organ that produces and stores sperm.
On track. Testicle is the correct answer.
Who is considered as a father of plant tissue culture?
Clear logic. Your choice haberlant is sound.
The penis and scrotum are part of the male's genitals.
Correct. True is the right answer.
A set of coiled tubes that connect to the vas deferens.
Smart move. Epididymis is an accurate answer.
Asexual reproduction is seen in the members of kingdom.
Well picked. All of these is the correct answer.
What is not a possible way that pollination can happen?
Well done. Sunlight is the right choice.
Vasectomy is the permanent surgical method for females.
Excellent choice. False is the right answer.
The condition needed by most seeds to break dormancy is.
Strong choice. Exposure to moisture is the right answer.
The female sex hormone that gives female characteristics.
You're right. Estrogen is the correct answer.
The part of a flower that protects flower in bud form is.
Excellent. Sipples is a brilliant choice.
The lining of the uterus that thickens as an egg matures. Good job. Endometrium works well here.
What do you call the cell that forms from fertilization?
You chose zygote. And it is correct.
New plants grow from pieces or cuttings of parent plants.
Great thinking. Vegetative propagation is the right choice.
Asexual mode of reproduction in amoeba is referred to as.
Valid point. Binary fission is true.
Which of the following plant are propagated by the roots?
Exactly. Carrot makes sense.
What is the male reproductive organs that produce sperms? Right choice.
Tests is the best answer.
The nesting of a fertilized egg in the wall of the uterus.
Smart pick. Implantation is the correct choice.
The transfer of pollen from the anther to stigma is called. Smart pick. Pollination is the correct choice.
Copper T as a contraceptive device is placed in the female. Good job. Uterus works well here. A type of organism that reproduces using binary fission is. Smart move. Bacteria is an accurate answer. Find the odd one out with respect to mode of reproduction.
Clear logic. Your choice, dog, is sound.
The change that is not observed during puberty in female is. Well picked. Change of cracking of voice is the correct answer. Growing foetus derive nutrition from mother's blood through. Nicely done. Placenta is a solid answer. The part of a flower that contains the ovary and the ovule.
Bravo. Pistil is the answer.
The two oviducts in human female unite in a bag called dash.
Well done. Uterus is the right choice.
Where a baby grows and develops for approximately 9 months.
Nice selection. Uterus is the correct and valid answer.
The two hormones that maintain the lining of the uterus are.
Right choice. Progesterone and estrogen is the best answer. Part of the plant taken for plant tissue culture is known as. Great thinking. Explant is the right choice. Females are born with all the egg cells they will ever have. Correct response. True is the most accurate answer. Amphibians and fishes are examples of. Perfect. External fertilization is the correct choice. What process happens when pollen falls on a flower's pistil?
Sharp thinking. Pollination is the right choice.
True or false? Organisms that reproduce asexually can evolve.
Strong choice. False is the right answer.
If the environment changes for an asexual offspring, it will.
On track. Die is the correct answer. Which of the following organism reproduces via fragmentation? Solid response. Spirogyra is a valid choice. The tissue connecting with developing embryo and uterus wall. Excellent. Placenta is a brilliant choice. An egg cell leaves the dashwa and goes into the fallopian tube.
Correct. Ovary is the right answer.
Male and female reproductive cells are collectively known as.
Excellent choice. Gametes is the right answer. Which organ allows oxygen and nutrients to get to the foetus? Good thinking. Placenta is the right answer.
Female reproductive hormone that is produced during pregnancy.
Nice work. You chose progesterone, and it is correct.
Planaria's most remarkable characteristics are its ability to.
You're right. Regenerate is the correct answer. Female body part that holds the fertilized egg while it grows. Well reasoned. Uterus is the correct choice.
Which organ provides the nourishment to the developing fetus?
Valid point. Placenta is true.
Find the odd one: gonorrhea, hepatitis B, genital herpes, AIDS.
You chose gonorrhea, and it is correct.
The following part of the germinating seed develops into root.
Exactly. Radical makes sense. Which Which among the following diseases is not sexually transmitted?
Great job. Hepatitis is the accurate answer.
How many weeks, on average, does it take for a baby to develop? Whoop.
Right again. 40 weeks is a valid answer.
Which of the following organism reproduces by multiple fission?
You got it. Your choice Plasmodium is right.
Daughter cells formed after the division of zygote are known as?
On track. Blastomeres is the correct answer. Where does the fertilization of egg cell occurs in human being? Correct response. Fallopian tube is the most accurate answer.
A typical angiosperm embryo sac at maturity is 8 nuclei width.
Good thinking. 7 cells is the right answer.
Which among the following does not reproduce by spore formation?
Solid response. Yeast is a valid choice.
In vegetative reproduction, the new individuals are genetically.
Great job. Similar is the accurate answer.
The cut part of a plant stem which is used in grafting is called.
Good job. Sign works well here.
The passing of physical characteristics from parent to offspring.
Exactly. Heredity makes sense.
A plant in which layering is adopted for vegetative propagation.
Smart pick. Jasmine is the correct choice.
After fertilization, the region that develops into fruit and seed.
You chose ovary and ovules, and it is correct.
Out of the following organs, which has the regenerative capacity?
You're right. Liver is the correct answer.
Sex reproduction is essential for living organisms in order to dash.
Right choice. Continue species from generation is the best answer.
Spore formation is most common asexual method of reproduction in?
Sharp thinking. Fungi is the right choice.
The fertilization which occurs outside the female body is called.
Correct. External fertilization is the right answer.
Asexual reproduction in plants is known as vegetative propagation.
Smart move. True is an accurate answer.
Sex cells have dash, the number of chromosomes of other body cells.
Excellent. Half is a brilliant choice.
The process by which an organism produces others of its same kind.
You got it? Your choice reproduction is right.
A feature of reproduction common to amoeba, spirogyra, and yeast is.
Excellent choice. They reproduce asexually is the right answer.
Vegetative propagation refers to formation of new plants from dash.
Well picked. Stem, roots, leaves is the correct answer.
Asexual reproduction is associated with what type of cell division?
Well reasoned. Mitosis is the correct choice. What organ do sperm and urine travel through to exit the male body? Nice work. You chose urethra, and it is correct.
Mammals, birds, and reptiles are examples of.
Right again. Internal fertilization is a valid answer.
Characters transmitted from parents to offspring are present in dash.
Nicely done. Genes is a solid answer.
The flowers in which stamens and pistils are present are called dash.
Nice selection. Bisexual flowers is the correct and valid answer. Which of the following plant can be vegetatively propagated by leaf? Bravo! Bryophyllum is the answer. Which is the portion on which grafting is done? It provides the roots. Well done. Stalk is the right choice. A bacterial infection that can cause discharge of the penis or vagina.
Great thinking. Gonorrhea is the right choice.
In human males, the testes lie in the scrotum because it helps in the strong choice. Formation of sperms is the right answer.
The part of the flower which is present in the center of the flower is
Perfect. Carpel is the correct choice.
the following part of the flower protects the flower in bud condition.
Valid point. Calyx is true.
In human females, an event that reflects onset of reproductive phases.
Clear logic. Your choice menstruation is sound. Which hormones stimulate the release of secondary oocyte during ovulation? You're right. Lech is the correct answer.
The development of root and shoot in tissue culture is determined by dash.
On track. Auxin and cytokinin ratio is the correct answer.
In dash, the disease of the parent plants get transferred to the offspring.
Good job. Asexual reproduction works well here.
Asexual reproduction produces offspring with DNA. That is, dash, the parent.
Great thinking. The same as is the right choice.
The ratio of number of chromosomes in a human zygote and a human sperm is
Perfect. 2-1 is the correct choice.
If the egg in human female is not fertilized, it lives for about dash days.
Strong choice. 1 is the right answer.
In a seed, plumule is called future dash and radicle is called future dash.
Great job. Shoot, root is the accurate answer.
This occurs in bacteria cells, which are prokaryotes.
Nice selection. Fission is the correct and valid answer.
The part of the female reproductive system where fertilization takes place.
Right again. Fallopian tube is a valid answer.
Which of the following glands produce sugars to provide energy for sperms?
Excellent choice. Cowper's glands is the right answer.
All forms of asexual reproduction use dash to grow new cells and organisms.
Well reasoned. Mitosis is the correct choice.
Plants like banana, rose, jasmine, orange have lost the capacity to produce.
Solid response. Seeds is a valid choice.
What factors are responsible for the rapid growth of rhizopus on the bread? Smart pick. Large number of spores is the correct choice.
The part of seed which grows and develops into root on germination is called.
Nicely done. Radicle is a solid answer.
The correct sequence of reproductive stages seen in flowering plants is dash.
Good thinking. Gamete, zygote, embryo, seedling is the right answer.
In a flower, the parts that produce male and female gametes are
valid point. Anther and ovary is true.
Which out of the following processes does not lead to the formation of clones?
Exactly. Fertilization makes sense.
The male reproductive parts of a flower, the stamens, are collectively known as.
Excellent. Androsium is a brilliant choice. The process of formation of two cells by the division of one cell is called dash.
Correct response. Binary fission is the most accurate answer.
A feature of reproduction that is common to yeast, amoeba, and bacterium is that.
Well done. They reproduce asexually is the right choice.
An undifferentiated mass of cells formed during plant tissue culture is known as.
Clear logic. Your choice callus is sound.
What process happens when a small root and a plant begin to grow out of a seed? Well picked. Germination is the correct answer. A feature of reproduction that is common to amoeba, yeast, and Spirogyra is that?
Right choice. They reproduce asexually is the best answer.
Menstruation flow at the end of the menstruation period is due to degeneration of.
Sharp thinking. Endometrium of uterus is the right choice.
For a stem cutting to be able to give rise to a new plant, it should have at least.
You chose one node, and it is correct.
What fluid contains millions of sperms that is produced by the sex organs of males?
Bravo. Semen is the answer.
What part of male reproductive system that function as a sac that holds the testes?
Correct. Scrotum is the right answer.
Require two organisms where two sex cells come together to reproduce an offspring.
Nice work. You chose sexual reproduction, and it is correct.
An alga which reproduces by the asexual reproduction method called fragmentation is.
Smart move. Spirogyra is an accurate answer.
The period during adolescence when the reproductive tissues begin to mature is called.
You got it?
Your choice puberty is right.
Which structure in male reproductive system that transport the sperm out of the body?
You got it? Your choice urethra is right.
A small copy of parent organism grows on parent body and breaks off as it gets larger.
Excellent. Pudding is a brilliant choice.
Binary fission describes the type of reproduction where the organism divides to form.
Correct. Two daughters is the right answer.
The disease caused by microorganism which reproduces by multiple fission is known as. Clear logic. Your choice malaria is sound.
In Rhizopus, tubular thread-like structures bearing sporangia at their tips are called.
On track. Hyphae is the correct answer.
When living tissue from a plant is extracted and placed in a medium, it is called dash.
Well reasoned. Explant is the correct choice.
Which of the following is not a part of the female reproductive system in human beings? Exactly. Testis makes sense.
What is the role of double fertilization in plants reproducing by sexual reproduction?
Good thinking. To produce endosperm is the right answer.
Which among the following is a unicellular organism that does not reproduce by budding?
Nicely done. Amoeba is a solid answer.
Dash contains all the information for making flowers, leaves, and every part of a plant. Sharp thinking. Da is the right choice. Sexual reproduction requires dash parents and asexual reproduction requires dash parents.
Strong choice. 2-1 is the right answer.
Which of the following is the correct sequence of events of sexual reproduction in a flower?
Solid response. Pollination, fertilization, embryo, seedling is a valid choice.
The lining of the uterus coming out through the vagina.
Good job. Menstruation works well here.
Which structure allows nutrients to pass to the embryo and takes wastes away from the embryo?
Bravo, placenta is the answer.
The ability of a cell to divide into several cells during reproduction in Plasmodium is called.
Nice work. You chose multiple fission, and it is correct.
The fusion of a male with a female gamete to form a zygote during sexual reproduction is called. Great thinking. Fertilization is the right choice.
What is the number of chromosomes in the gamete of an organism as compared to the somatic cells?
Valid point. Half is true.
Along the path of the vas deferens, the secretions of which gland provide nutrition to the sperms.
Perfect. Seminal vesicles is the correct choice.
There is a greater possibility for the evolution of a new species in organisms, which reproduce by.
Great job. Fertilization is the accurate answer.
Every cell of a new plant will have the same set of DNA code.
Smart pick. True is the correct choice.
These are types of sexual reproduction: mitosis, fission, regeneration, budding, vegetative, propagation.
Well picked. False is the correct answer.
The embryo in humans gets nutrition from the mother's blood with the help of a special tissue called.
Well done. Placenta is the right choice.
The surgical method, which prevents the sperms from reaching the ovum and pregnancy, does not occur is.
Correct response. Vasectomy is the most accurate answer.
The process of the division of cell into several cells during reproduction in Plasmodium is termed as.
Nice selection. Multiple fission is the correct and valid answer.
The rope-like structure containing blood vessels that connects the placenta with the fetus is known as.
Right again. Umbilical cord is a valid answer.
When an organism breaks into a number of parts and each part develop into an individual, it is called.
You're right. Regeneration is the correct answer.
5. When an animal is cut into pieces and each part gives rise to new organism, the process is called dash.
Right choice. Fragmentation is the best answer.
The male gamete of maize plant has 10 chromosomes. What will be the number of chromosomes in the zygote?
Excellent choice. 20 is the right answer.
If a plant produces seeds that are sticky, and dash most likely moves the seeds from one place to another. You chose animal, and it is correct.
The gametes are special type of cells called reproductive cells which contain only dash the amount of DNA. Smart move. Half is an accurate answer.
The property of an undifferentiated cell that has the potential to develop into an entire plant is called. Nicely done. Totipotency is a solid answer. Cutting the roots from a carrot and allowing it to grow into a newly formed daughter carrot is called dash. You chose vegetative reproduction, and it is correct. In Rhizopus fungus,
The fine thread-like structures spread on the whole surface of slice of bread are called. Clear logic. Your choice hype is sound. Which of the following is the correct sequence of organs of male reproductive system for transport of sperms? Correct response. Witness, vas deferens, urethra is the most accurate answer. What is structure 3? Good job. Ovary works well here. During adolescence, several changes occur in the human body. Mark one change associated with sexual maturation in boys. On track. Cracking a voice is the correct answer. Choose the correct option. Valid point. Budding is true. The unborn baby in the uterus, in the early stages of development, is called. Exactly. An embryo makes sense. The male reproductive part of a flower contains 2 round-shaped structures at their tip. These structures are known as. Strong choice. Anther is the right answer. Pistil is made up of dash. Correct. Stigma, style and ovary is the right answer. Starfish can asexually reproduce by producing offspring from a broken piece of the parent organism. This is an example of dash. Good thinking. Fragmentation is the right answer. Identify the structure labeled B. Nice selection. Placenta is the correct and valid answer. Vegetative propagation is said to occur when parts like the root, stem and leaf develop into new plants under appropriate conditions. Smart move. True is an accurate answer. A hydra reproduces when an outgrowth, or bud, forms and continues to develop until it falls off of the parent. This is an example of. Smart pick. Budding is the correct choice. The skin cells of an animal contain 8 chromosomes. How many chromosomes will be present in each of the gametes produced by this animal? Sharp thinking. 4 is the right choice. Where does fertilization usually take place? Well done. Fallopian tube is the right choice. What is the scientific name for a sex cell? Solid response. Gamete is a valid choice. The arrow points to the female structure dash. Right again. Stigma is a valid answer. Prokaryotes reproduce asexually via. Well picked. Binary fission is the correct answer. What is the name of the male gamete in humans? You're right. Sperm is the correct answer. The unborn baby in the uterus in the later stages of development is called. Great thinking. A fetal is the right choice. This is an example of asexual reproduction by dash. Right choice. Spores is the best answer. How many parents does asexual reproduction involve? Bravo, 1 is the answer. Which of these are both male reproductive structures? Well reasoned. Anther and filament is the correct choice. Where in the body does fertilization occur in humans? Excellent. Oviduct is a brilliant choice. The part of the flower represented in the picture is. You got it? Your choice pistil is right. Name the process of reproduction shown in the picture. Excellent choice. Regeneration is the right answer.
The human male reproductive parts consist of dash, del, and dash.
Perfect. Tests and penis is the correct choice.
The narrator says the hydra will be, almost, an exact copy of its parent. What process might sometimes cause a genetic change during a sexual reproduction?
Nice work.
You chose mutation and it is correct.
What type of asexual reproduction is illustrated in this picture?
Great job. Budding is the accurate answer.
How you will get all these quiz questions in PDF books format.
Sharp thinking. Contact Narayan Changder on Facebook is the right choice.